Hello, and welcome to Central Booking, where writers and readers are the authority. I'm your host, John Valeri, and I've spent the last decade reviewing books and interviewing authors online, in print, and in person. Now that many of us are social distancing, I thought it might be fun to do virtual visits with some of my favorite writers. After all, there's no better distraction than a good book, or a great one. My first guest, in Pinch Me, is my childhood hero, Marcia Clark. Yes, that Marcia Clark. You probably know Marcia as the fiery lead prosecutor from the O.J. Simpson trial. Or, if you're a bit younger, from Sarah Paulson's award-winning portrayal of her in FX's recent miniseries, American Crime Story, The People v. O.J. Simpson. Marcia Clark began her career practicing law as a criminal defense attorney in 1979 before joining the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office in 1981. She would spend the next 14 years there, eventually working in the Elite Special Trials Unit, which handled the most complex, high-profile cases. She won thousands of convictions during her tenure, including 19 out of 20 homicides before Simpson. In the aftermath of the trial, Marcia left the DA's office and collaborated with Teresa Carpenter on Without a Doubt, a memoir chronicling her work on the Simpson case. The book came out in 1997 and immediately topped the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, and Publishers Weekly bestsellers lists. That experience rekindled Marcia's childhood dream of writing crime fiction, and she soon began scripting legal dramas for television. Her debut novel, Guilt by Association, was published in 2011 and became a national bestseller. 3 books featuring prosecutor Rachel Knight followed. Then, Marcia switched gears in 2016, introducing a new heroine that allowed her to revisit her roots. Criminal defense attorney Samantha Brinkman, whose thirst for vengeance makes for unique ministrations of justice. Blood Defense was a #1 Kindle bestseller and was followed later that year by Moral Defense and, in 2017, Snap Judgment. Marcia then took a brief hiatus to concentrate on television projects. In recent years, she fronted A&E's Marcia Clark Investigates the First 48, offered color commentary on CBS's Pink Collar Crimes, and co-wrote and executive produced ABC's 10-part miniseries The Fix. Now, Marcia Clark is back to books with Final Judgment, the 4th and final Samantha Brinkman novel. Publishers Weekly gave the title a starred review, noting, "The plot twists are both plausible and shocking in this intelligent page-turner. Fans of whodunits featuring ethical dilemmas will be pleased." Further, AuthorLink called Final Judgment a classy novel of high-stakes suspense shot through with ambiguous morality and laced with wit and humor. Recently, Marcia joined me from her home in Calabasas, California, to talk about her lifelong fascination with crime, both real and imagined, and how she eventually achieved her lifelong dream of becoming an author. It's quite the story, but you don't have to take my word for it. Take hers. Ladies and gentlemen, the incomparable Marcia Clark. Hey everybody, I am John Valeri, coming to you live, not really live, but I'm in Connecticut, and my guest tonight, Marcia Clark, is in California. So we are a country apart, but united in our social distancing.
Yeah.
Thank you for being the very first guest of this little show.
What an honor and a pleasure.
Yeah, I'll bet. We'll see about that. Anyway, I thought I would start by asking how the heck you are out there in California, given the state of the world.
We are being very socially responsible and distancing like crazy. And it's really been, I'm really impressed. Overall, I think people have been super considerate of each other, concerned about making sure everybody is safe. Not a lot of crazy, I'm not doing this kind of stuff. Everybody really pretty much is. And for the most part, we're seeing the curve flatten. We are seeing things get better, particularly in the communities like, LA at large is a very big area, but the smaller communities, you can really tell that the numbers are dropping and dropping and dropping. And that's because people are doing the right thing.
Well, that's great. I'm glad some people are taking social distancing seriously, because that does seem to be, the one thing that's actually working.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of people don't seem to understand that once it starts working, you can't just run out and go to the beach and do all those crazy things. It takes a little time, but you and I are being responsible on our computers.
We are being responsible. It's true. I will say the one good thing that we've seen as a result of this is the traffic is wonderful.
Oh, I know. LA traffic has never looked like that. It's like a
Never.
weird post-apocalyptic movie.
It
I saw
is.
a picture the
It
other day,
actually
and I was
really
like,
is.
no way. It was
Yeah.
kind of like seeing Times Square completely empty. Like that's
Yeah.
just
Yeah, it's
not a
crazy. I
thing.
mean, it's kind of, you know, it's awesome and scary at the same
Yeah,
time.
that is very true.
Yeah.
So you have a new book coming out. It's kind of a strange time to have a book coming out, but I think what better way to distract yourself, than a good read. So we're just gonna have a little chat. I'm gonna ask you some questions, and we're gonna try to get sort of the whole little story arc of your career, how you came to writing, where you are now with that, and of course, what comes next.
Yeah.
So the first thing I must ask you is, like myself, you were fascinated by crime from a very, very young age, both real and imagined. So can you talk a little bit about your earliest memories of how you came to crime and how that has sort of sustained you throughout your life and career path?
I mean, I was fascinated by crime from the time I was super young. I want to say 4 or 5 years old. So as you can, I was a weird kid. And I would make up stories, I would make up like these crimes. I'd be with my friends. Let's walk around. Oh, let's look. Oh, there's this, there's always an abandoned house somewhere in the neighborhood, right? And that it was falling apart, oh, crime happened there. Every spot on the floor was a blood drop, and and it was like, I'd go on these little tours of the neighborhood making up crime stories from the time I was about 5 years old. And it never stopped. I was making up stories when I was in elementary school, whenever we had, a creative writing kind of exercise that was always about murder and mayhem. And
Sure.
so, yeah, it was an abiding fascination, which is why when I went to law school, in the first month, I knew I'm going to do criminal law. There's no other way. I mean, I could have done something much more useful, like corporate law, contract law, real estate law, and probate, but no,
Well,
no,
boring.
that'd be murder. So it's been, it's been a very consistent theme in my life. So, yeah,
Apparently so. In that house that you were talking about, that one house in the neighborhood, most
yeah.
people think it's ours, but we actually live here. you know,
Well, then you have a fascinating house, and I would love to see it and take
yeah,
people on tours with
maintenance
you.
is not my thing. But anyway, moving on, I digress as I do. So, okay, we're gonna jump ahead a bunch of years. But in 1997, you came back to writing and you published your first book, Without a Doubt, with Teresa Carpenter, which was a memoir of your work on the Simpson trial. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how that collaborative process sort of rekindled your passion for writing.
So I was like the luckiest person in the world because Teresa Carpenter is just a genius and also a wonderful person. Like when you get those two things together,
Yeah,
it was a fabulous thing. And collaborating with her was just a joy. And it was a thrilling thing too, because she would say, okay, I want you to write about this, what things that were happening. So I would do it. I would, try and write, the chapter on whatever, the car chase. And then I would see what she did with it, and it was like Rumpelstiltskin, turning straw into gold. It was the most amazing, beautiful thing, and it really rekindled my love of writing and my desire to write. And when we finished the Simpson book, I said, you know what? Let's write crime novels. Let's write crime fiction. And she said, no, you write crime fiction. You can do this. Go do this. And I didn't do it right away. I actually got sidetracked and wound up writing for television, which I love just as much. And of course, they were legal shows, for the DA's, one based on a DA's office for Lifetime, and then wrote pilot scripts based on the DA's and defense attorneys with my writing partner. And so kept writing, but didn't come back to novels until I think it's 2006. I decided, I really, really, really have always wanted to write crime fiction novels. And so then I started doing that. And then that led to the Rachel Night series.
awesome. And I have to say, I tell people all the time, Without a Doubt is a fabulous book because the collaboration between the two of you really captured your voice and your personality, unlike a lot of books that came out of that fiasco. You could exchange one for the other. And I think yours really stood the test of time because it had that personality and a very deep honesty behind it. But yeah, so to move forward to Rachel Night that you mentioned, I'm wondering if you can talk about how creating that character who was a prosecutor in the special trials unit like you were, how that allowed you to relive your better days in the DA's office and the friendships that you had there.
Yeah, it was, that's what I wanted to do. I thought, I really loved my time in special trials before the Simpson case came along. And it was like a wonderful, it was a completely immersive experience because when you're in trial, these were particularly heavy duty trials. Special trials handled all the high profile murder cases for the county. And so when you went to trial, for months, sometimes years at a time. And then there was all the prep time before that, where you'd go out in the street, the detective, talk to the witnesses, interview them yourself, go to the crime scenes. I mean, it was all very hands-on and very immersive and very in-depth. And I really, really loved it. And you made great friends in that situation, friends with detectives, friends with other DAs. It was just a wonderful life, and it was a mission as much as it was more than it was a job.
Sure.
And I wanted to relive that, some of the fun times and the camaraderie, as well as the serious times and the way that you were fighting for justice and you had a real purpose that was a higher purpose. And so but a lot of laughs too. So I wanted to recreate and revisit that, and I did. And it was really, I had a great time writing that series because it was a chance to revisit those years in the DA's office.
Sure. And I have to ask because people want to know and they ask all the time, might you ever consider revisiting Rachel Night?
I might. There's no, I certainly don't believe, never say never. I wouldn't even think of it because I love Rachel and I love her buddies, Bailey and Tony. And they're a fun trio. So I would definitely revisit that. I have to think about the wrinkle of today's world because it was a while ago, right? Things have changed.
Sure.
And things have changed in the way that DAs do their job now too, technologically, everything, a lot of things in today's world. Social media has changed the way lawyers do their job. And the impact of that is fascinating to me. So that, I would incorporate that. But yeah, that door is open.
Well, that's great. I'm going to email you privately because I've been thinking on this and I came up with your crossover novel to, pit Rachel against Samantha.
We've talked about that. You brought that up before. I think it's a great idea. I mean, the two of them, they probably wind up joining forces. I don't know.
You probably would. You write some dynamic characters, but actually we can springboard from that to Samantha Brinkman because Samantha Brinkman is your current character and she is pretty much the antithesis of Rachel Night. So many people don't know that you started your career as a criminal defense attorney and you did appellate law while you were writing books after your time as a prosecutor. So Samantha Brinkman is a hard-charging, morally ambiguous criminal defense attorney who basically will do whatever is necessary within and around the law to achieve what she thinks is justice. So can you talk a little bit about how that took you back to your roots?
Yeah, I mean, so the defense attorney has a totally different role than the prosecutor does, because the prosecutor is required to see that justice is done, regardless of whether that leads to a conviction or not. It's not about getting notches in your belt. It's about making sure that a fair trial is had, making sure that a defendant is fairly charged with what he's done, not overcharging, and make sure he gets sentenced fairly as well. And of course, make sure the process of the trial is one that is fair to the defendant. The defense attorney doesn't have to worry about that. The defense attorney only has to worry about his client and making sure that the client gets the very best representation he possibly can. Stretching the limits of that with a character like Samantha is that she does everything and within and without the law to take care of her client, and occasionally breaks a lot of time breaks the law. But she also, and so she goes to the ends of the earth for her clients. However, she also likes to punish the guilty, the people who are the real predators, the people who are the killers and that sort of thing, who prey on other people, as opposed to the person who's trying to support his family and winds up stealing, for example, to do it. The people who commit crime for more understandable reasons, empathetic reasons, if you will. So she's on board with them and she goes to the ends of the earth for them. The others, the predators, different story, not so much. And she will find ways to take care of them, so to speak, that are very extra legal, but usually, unusual.
Yes. It's a nice way of putting it, but true. So can I ask you, what compels you to write about those gray areas, the moral ambiguities? And is it difficult, having a character that has, her unique interpretation of justice, making that person someone worth rooting for? Do you have to worry about, oh, I might, offend my reader or off-put my reader because she's a little bit out there? Is that a concern for you, or you just go with the character?
Um, yeah, I go with the character. I think that I give readers a lot of credit. They understand and I think appreciate the gray area, and doing the right thing, doing the wrong thing for the right reason. I think that they appreciate that and get it. So Samantha is a complicated character. She had a very rough childhood, very rough. And between the abuse and the neglect, the scars were bound to happen. And as a result of the injustice that she was raised with, and even within the justice system that she was subjected to when she was a child, she has no great regard for the law, no great regard for police officers, but great regard for ultimate justice, for fairness, real fairness. And so even though she does do extra legal things, sometimes homicidally extra legal things, she does them for a good reason, and the people who suffered deserve to. And so in that respect, I think it does keep her relatable and sympathetic, even though she's doing things that are pretty violent and pretty wild.
Sure. And okay, we should probably add a disclaimer because so many people, assume that Rachel Knight is your alter ego. So if they were going to say, well, maybe Samantha Brinkman is the other side of Marcia Clark, we should probably tell them, at least as far as I know, you're not running down people with your car or anything like that when nobody's watching.
No, I certainly wouldn't do it when anyone's watching.
Oh,
No, I don't do that. I don't do that.
and of
But
course,
I mean, in this world when so often we see people not getting what they deserve in terms of either good or bad, you know what I mean?
sure.
Not getting rewarded for things they should, or not getting punished for things they should. I think it's satisfying to read about a character who does exact justice and who does make people pay or get rewarded as they should. I think that speaks to a desire we all have to see true justice happen.
Sure. And I think that makes her a very good friend to a lot of people. And we probably all wish we had a friend, if not just like that, close to
Close.
that.
I mean, if you had Samantha on your side, oh man.
Yeah, right. I wouldn't have to
I
worry
feel that
about
way
things. I
Yeah.
was going to say I wouldn't have to leave my house, but I can't anyway. So,
Yeah.
um, so you had alluded to Samantha's past. Can you speak a little bit more, about her past and how she sort of now has this makeshift family with her, her associates and her newfound father? How she has been able to develop these new intimacies, but also how that can actually be, kind of a scary thing for her because then they all become involved in her business, whether or not they know it. So it sort of adds an extra texture of suspense.
Right.
So going from
There is that tension.
basically, sorry, I was going to say, so she basically goes from feeling like she has no family, or at least not family who's worth her time. Hello, Celeste, the mother, the narcissist mother
Yeah.
and all mothers. So she really tries to sort of isolate herself and not have these intimate relationships, but there are a few people who are an exception to that rule. So can you talk about those people and how, developing those relationships actually keeps her from being entirely self-destructive?
Yeah. Yeah. So she was raised by a narcissistic mother who never really meant to have her, didn't want her. Was what she really wanted was to have a very wealthy husband. She wound up having one, but along the way, she wound up with a boyfriend who abused Samantha when she was 12, 13, 14. Samantha had a terrible life. And that scarred her tremendously. And the only friend that she could make was Mishi, in the case, in our story. Mishi becomes the sister she never had, and is basically Samantha's only ally through her childhood years, and the only person Samantha trusted at all. And when she decided to open her law practice, Mishi became a paralegal, also office manager, also bookkeeper. She became her everything. So they worked together to build the business. And in the process of that, Sam winds up hiring one of her clients who is a brilliant hacker. Alex is a fantastic guy. He's amazing, brilliant, funny, and of course very useful.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
he's able to hack into just about anything very quickly. Um, these three become like a family. You know, your friends or your family that you choose. And Samantha's not able to trust very many people. The other person that comes into her life in the very first book, in Blood Defense, turns out to be is her client. It's a very high profile murder case in which an LAPD detective, very celebrated detective, is accused of murdering two girls in Laurel Canyon, one of whom is an actress who had been on the skids and was making her big comeback, and she got murdered. She and her roommate were killed. He was accused of it, and he hired Sam to represent him, knowing that he was her father. Sam did not know. And when she found out, she almost fired him as a client.
Yeah.
But he's in her life too. And they find over the course of this series that they have a lot more in common than either one of them ever imagined in the beginning. They both have that sense of justice at all costs, and they will decide what that is and how to make it out, because the justice system frequently doesn't work. They both have a mistrust of the system that way, think it's broken. So that bunch together crushes crime. But yes, so with her father, it's a different story because he's kind of on the same page as her, and I would call it a little bit on the sociopathic spectrum,
Sure.
and it is a spectrum. So it means that she has less problems with a conscience when it comes to doing things that are outside the law and things that are even kind of violent, because she does them for a good reason. So he feels the same way. She discovers this is a process they discover, discovering this about each other. So she's less worried about him, embroiling him in what she's doing. However, Mishy's a different story. Alex is a different story. Alex cannot afford to get busted for anything. And so she's constantly kind of trying to bob and weave and not let them see exactly what she's doing. So when it comes to the really violent stuff, the serious stuff, as opposed to just hacking or maybe social engineering some information out of people, she walls that off from them. And there's tension there because they are noticing that things are happening to certain clients or to certain witnesses, and it seems very coincidental. She always has an excuse for that, but there is that tension that is ongoing because she's constantly trying to protect them.
Sure. It's a great group of characters, which of
It's
course
fun.
leads me to this. Final Judgment is the fourth and final Samantha novel, at least for now. And really quickly, before we get into the nuts and bolts of that book, I'm just going to give a quick summary for people who might
Yeah.
not be familiar with the plot. But basically, we've talked about how Samantha has a very hard time letting people into her life. And so for the last couple books, there's sort of been a very periphery relationship with a guy named Nico. And, we don't see him very much, and they seem to be good at the distance thing. He's a martial artist, an entrepreneur. He travels a lot. Samantha is a workaholic. So the relationship seems to work best when they, maybe see each other occasionally for drinks, and that's about it. But this time around, they are in a more serious relationship, and they're actually on a beach vacation in Bora Bora, which of course, as soon as you read this, you know that something's going to happen because Samantha does not take vacation. And if Samantha takes vacation, it's probably not going to end well. And sure enough, they are interrupted by a phone call, and Nico learns that he, his mother, and some friends have been wiped out. They've lost an enormous amount of money in what was supposed to be a sure thing investment. So they rush back to Los Angeles, where Nico's mother is financially ruined. So not only is she crippled financially, but also physically because she has a stroke as the result of the stress of the situation. And then things go from bad to worse because one of the brokers who was telling him this is such a great investment, you all need to get involved, one of them that ends up dead. The other one ends up missing. And of course, Nico becomes the primary person of interest, and Samantha then has to defend him. So hopefully that's your book. I read a lot, but I'm thinking that's Final Judgment, right? Does that sound
That was pretty well done. That was
Thank
pretty well
you.
done.
Thank
Yeah, it
you.
was a Bitcoin venture, and these guys are these two partners that have this company called Gold Strike. We're in bed with, not literally, but we're in business with Nico initially because he's a very world famous martial artist who had branched out into merchandising as well as videos, as well as classes that were world renowned. Became a really big guy. And so that he had money to invest, they got him to invest with them. And he did very well. As a result, he recommended these guys to his friends, to his mother, and they did quite well for a while until this last big hit with Bitcoin investment that went completely belly up and is ultimately revealed to be a complete fraud. And it destroyed many, many, many people that were close to him. Nico was the point man for it. And when his mother had a stroke, as a result of the stress, he became a person of interest because his motive was so clear in it. And he had been with them. He was the one interacting with these two partners more than anyone else, and had been with them on the night, in fact, that one of them was his last night on this earth. And so, yes, they know that he knows his way in and out of their houses and how to find them, unlike all the other investors who barely knew them. So he was looking good for it. And when it turns out that he is a suspect, of course, Sam is going to have to try and take care of him. And this poses enormous questions for her, because then it becomes, she's almost hypocritical, because, wow, what if he did kill these two losers? These guys really destroyed so many lives. They're kind of Bernie Madoff-like, destroyed people, all for their own personal gain. Could she really blame Nico if he did kill them? And for her, the issue is a little different than it would be for most people. She doesn't mind the notion that he might have killed them. What bothers her is that he kept it a secret.
Right.
He didn't tell her about it, and he continues to hide it from her throughout the investigation, which really, really upsets her, because there's no trust between them. Of course, what she's ignoring is she's never told him about all the things she's done either.
Sure.
And gently around the corners, Mishi and Alex, Mishi especially, who kind of guesses what Sam is up to behind the scenes and trying to protect her from knowing, kind of confronts her with that double standard that she has. It's like, you're blaming him for not being upfront with you. How upfront have you been with him? And she has that conversation point blank with her father, who says, hey, So there's a lot in this that it has to do with Sam's unique point of view, the double standard she has, confronting her own hypocrisy, and the relationship with Nico, which is different, but it also has an ending in which she's able to exact justice of a personal nature for herself that I don't want to give away, but was key to her throughout the whole series. And she got to have that final satisfaction.
Well, you just took that question right out of my mouth.
Oh, sorry.
No, not at all. That's great. I would say, because something interesting you said to me once was that you're not sure you believe in closure for even, fictional characters, let alone real life people. So I would say if there's not necessarily closure, it's kind of a full circle type of thing. So there's definitely some satisfaction for people who've been following along from the beginning, in addition to the standalone plot that you get with the Nico story. But I did also want to ask you, this book has a bit of a different tone. Usually your books start with a body or several bodies, and so right off the bat there's a murder investigation. And this one is, there's the money goes missing, and really that drives the narrative, and it's sort of necessary because you have to establish the depth of the relationship between Samantha and Nico. So can you talk about the difference in tone and whether or not that made the writing any different or more challenging for you?
I wanted to take a different point of view with this, the usual, here's the body, here we go kind of thing. I wanted to start with a personal relationship. I wanted that to be a thread throughout, because she really has been, her relationships have been limited to Mishi and Alex and her father. And so for a change, I wanted to let her have a real potential life partner in Nico. So we start with them. And then I thought, okay, so now let's build out what happens, and let's let her be there in real time when the murder happens, as opposed to having her come on the scene afterwards. And that was just a different twist I wanted to put on the story. So she can watch the actual investigation unfold from the time before everyone's dead. She meets these victims in life and deals with them and has an opinion about them, forms conclusions about them, and then can use that information in the course of the investigation, which I thought that's a kind of different wrinkle, if you will. And then, of course, weaving the personal story between her and Nico, the kind of cat and mouse almost that they had going on between them throughout the story, gave it a different twist as well. And I thought that all of that was kind of a fun change of pace for me. In some respects, I found it easier, oddly. and I don't know why. Maybe
Maybe
it
it
was
was
his
all those
mood that
drinks you were
day.
having on the beach. They sounded
Well, like,
delightful.
oh, that was, oh, let me tell you, it's the heaven and the hell of writing scenes like that. Like, I'm not going to be there anytime soon. Even then, before this virus, I don't
Yeah.
have time to go. I can't go. I'm going to live through her. So, writing those scenes is like the heaven of it. I'm kind of putting myself there. The hell of it, I'm not there.
Yeah. Not close enough.
No.
Okay, so winding down, I did want to ask you one last question about the book. I'm just wondering, there was a little bit of a hiatus because you got very involved in television work, and you did 3 shows, whether you were in front of the camera, behind the camera, or in some cases both. Um, so at what point in the writing did you realize that this was going to be the final Samantha book, or did you know that all along?
I knew that. I knew that all along. I mean, that was going to be it because I had felt at the time, I'm just at that point where it was Samantha, where I think it's time to let her get, wrap up some things. Um, I can come back to her, and I really like her. In fact, as a matter, ABC Studios optioned Blood Defense, optioned Samantha for a 1-hour drama series, and me and the co-creators, Sarah Fain and Liz Craft, wrote a pilot for NBC based on her because the character is just so much fun. So it does make me feel like I might go back to her.
Sure.
I would love if I could go back to her on television because she'd be a
Yeah.
fun character to write for TV. But for now, I thought, we'll let this be her swan song.
Sure. So the obvious next question is, what are you working on now? Because I hear you're working on a book and also a couple of television projects, possibly.
I'm working on, so the book, oh my God, John, this was one of those, what did I do to myself and why? I decided that I was going to write a standalone. And then the story I came up with basically involves 2 prosecutors, one who's relatively younger, who was a former defense attorney. I know it kind of sounds like me, but it's really not. And then a veteran prosecutor. And the veteran prosecutor picks up this big case, and the younger one winds up being her second chair. And then there's a third person who is the defendant, the murderer, who's a young girl who is accused of murdering her mother. And I decided that, it's a mystery within a mystery and told from 3 different points of view. So we have alternating chapters: young prosecutor, older prosecutor, defendant. And it's like, oh, geez.
There's a lot of voices in your head.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like, constantly, because they each have their emotional arcs, which are gnarly, and issues in their personal lives that are gnarly. And it was, and periodically I would just stop and go, why did I do this? Why? What was I thinking? Anyway, but I'm getting through it. I'm going to probably be able to wrap it up in a month or so. And hopefully, knock wood, it'll be good.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, the irony is you wanted to write a standalone before, and then Samantha showed up.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Yeah, it was really funny. That's what I was thinking of doing. And then there she was. She's like popped into my head saying, what about me? And okay, there you
Right,
go.
and now you know why you didn't do it in the first place, because all this extra punishment and torture.
Oh, well.
And so are you able to tease your television work at all, or is that too early?
That's just in development, so I'm keeping that low key.
That works. That works. All right. Final question, and then I will let you back to your Saturday night, an exciting night at home.
Yes.
A majority of us.
On Netflix Saturday night.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So what I want to ask you, and this is sort of an opportunity to give some advice or encouragement or reflective thoughts to those people who have their own creative ambitions and just maybe haven't found the courage to follow through on that. Because one of the things I really admire about you is you are very forward thinking and constantly working on like 5 different things. And if one doesn't work out, you move on to the next one and the next one and the next one. You must have a very full stove because there are always things on the back burner. But especially publishing in television are, very, very difficult industries to work in. There's no guarantee that your book is going to get published. There's certainly no guarantee that your television show is going to get picked up. So I'm assuming it takes a lot of faith and fortitude to follow through on that. So looking back in your own experience, what would you tell to people, who are thinking, I really, really want to try this, but I don't know if I can, or I don't know if I should?
Well, but you never know until you try. You got to do it. And it's kind of like, it's a great metaphor for the book I'm writing. I conceived of it and thought, boy, that'll be fun. That'll be great. But I've never done anything like it, not even remotely like it. I mean, yeah, there's a murder mystery, a couple of them, but that's about it. And the rest of it, the tenor, the tone, the setup, all of it, completely different. And there were times in the course of it, I thought, I can't do this. This is too hard. This is just out of my wheelhouse. I can't handle it. And then I thought, no, I have to try. I have to give it a shot. I have to push it all the way through just to see. Okay, if I don't, move it on next. So that's the thing I think I would say is everybody has moments of doubt. Everybody fails. I failed. There are a lot of books that never saw the light of day, thank God. So, you have to, if you love it, you've got to pursue it, you've got to go for it, and you do whatever it takes to make that happen. Because if you don't, you'll never know what could have been. At the very least, you'll have the satisfaction of knowing you gave it your best shot. And that's really important, because the one thing that can really kind of depress you or is bad for the soul is the sense of, I'm too afraid to even try. I'm too afraid to even take a chance. You're better off taking the chance, even if it doesn't work out. You have the satisfaction of knowing you gave it your shot. You had the courage to go step off that cliff, touch
Sure.
that hot stove, if you will, because you said the stove. I like that. And that's why I also think it's good to have multiple ideas in mind and have as many plates spinning as you can handle. That doesn't mean you work on all of them at the same time by any means, but have a backup. Everybody has more than one idea. And it's not a bad idea to have a few of them if you can. Do a few outlines or even just a few notes, so that if the one that you're working on just isn't coming together, move on and and keep moving forward. The whole thing is keep moving, keep going.
Well, that seems like an appropriate ending point, don't you think?
I think, because we're going to keep going tonight, but
That's
we're going
right.
to go to our couches and Netflix.
That's what we do. That's right. We go and we go and we go, and then we go some more.
Yeah,
We're crazy
exactly.
like
And
that.
John, you should know, you're one that you're never stopping. You're constantly doing everything under the sun. I can't believe how much you do in a day. So I think you should give some advice on that score too, because you're amazing.
Oh, you're very kind. Yeah, you should see life in this house. I tell you, I say, WWMD, what would Marcia do? And the answer is undoubtedly something. She would do something. So get up and do something. Even if it's just drinking coffee, I do that. And I say, Marcia would have a cup of coffee, right?
Coffee, can't live without it.
No.
I mean,
No,
yeah,
no.
the elixir of life.
It is so true. And I appreciate it greatly. All right, well, I'm going to remind people really quickly that Final Judgment comes out on Tuesday, April 21st, which is really, really soon. And I do want to say, I know a lot of people are concerned about delays with delivery, given the state of the world, but pre-orders are available right now. If you pre-order, a digital edition, it will magically show up on release date, and then you don't have to worry about, whether or not your physical book arrives on publication date. But congratulations to you on a new book, and thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to chat with me tonight. I appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. You're the best. You're the very, very best. We've been doing this for a long time, and every time is amazing. Every time it's so much fun. You are awesome.
Oh, you were too kind. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we recorded this. No.
You haven't. We haven't.
They're going to be thinking I'm in your house, like pointing something at you. I swear, I'm in Connecticut, Marcia's in California.
Yeah,
True.
but just so you know, I mean, see that law library he's in?
Yeah, right?
We're working a case together.
Yes. I'm the defendant.
No.
But are you prosecuting me or defending me? That's the
Defending, of course. What, are you kidding?
yeah. That's true. I could probably use the help.
Oh man, John,
Well,
thank you.
if anything bad happens, Samantha's my fallback. So
Yeah, she got you. She got your back.
right. All right. Well, thank you so much. It was good to talk to you, and best of luck with the book.
Thank you so much, John. Take care. Have a great night.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
That's it for this episode of Central Booking. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a thing.